let's say you're working on a problem or somebody's come to you with a problem and you've got a history with the individual.
Mm.
And so they're describing the situation and you already have a preconceived point of view about this individual. You think, this person always exaggerates, they're always dramatizing situations.
Hmm.
If you've got attention agility, you're aware of that thought
Mm.
and you're not letting that thought influence how you're taking in the information because you're risking missing something important
Yeah.
because you're making a judgment about the situation based on your bias about the person bringing the situation to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Today, you get to hear a conversation I had with Lisa Weaver and Dr. Jay Cohn about how we navigate uncertainty and specifically how we leverage our thoughts and our thinking skills to do so in an effective way. I had several insights from this conversation and also in the assessment that they reference and are offering for free that help me recognize blind spots in my thinking and in my problem solving approaches. So they talk about the assessment in this episode, and you can access it in the show notes. And I know where these blind spots come from and what experiences have spurred them on. And honestly, just this awareness as I use it can help me think more clearly. So I am so excited for you all to hear this conversation and take this assessment. So, Lisa Weaver is an ICF certified coach, graduate of the Hudson Institute of Coaching, and co founder of Unstuck Minds. Lisa says that her story is one of evolution from corporate leader and sales expert to entrepreneur, and from early career hustle to midlife mom, navigating what matters most. For the past 15 years, she's been following her inner compass, taking risks aligned with her passions, building an entrepreneurial enterprise, and shaping the life she wants to live. I am totally here for that. Today, she helps others do the same. Lisa's coaching, and she coaches with our business as well, focuses on helping people navigate complex and disorienting life choices, uncover what's hidden, and move forward with clarity and confidence. Our second guest on the episode, Dr. Jay Cohn, is an author and also a co founder of Unstuck Minds. Jay has spent the past 35 years supporting leadership development and organizational change, and we've had a chance to work together, and he's phenomenal. Jay served for 5 years as adjunct faculty for the Executive MBA program at the University of Texas at Dallas. Before starting up Unstuck Minds with Lisa, he worked as a senior consultant with the Boston based consulting and training firm Interaction Associates. Jay has traveled extensively, working with some of the world's largest public and private companies. He has helped executive teams and literally thousands of organizational leaders discover the insights and options they need to get unstuck. And don't we all want that? His articles on leadership development have appeared in Training Magazine, the Training and Development Journal, and so many others. And he is the author of this book, which I love the title, The Surprising Power of Not Knowing What to Do, Discovering Creativity and Compassion in a Time of Chaos. This is such an interesting and fun conversation with two people that I love dearly, and I know you will as well. So thank you all so much for joining and enjoy. So, Lisa, Jay, thank you all so much for joining today. I was looking forward to this for a number of reasons. One, because I just like spending time with both of you all, and I was thinking far too long since we've all gotten together for coffee. So this is like a
Yeah.
virtual get together is one. And then two, because, when I think about this topic, I can't think of something more important than learning how to think. It's like that meta skill. So I was thinking about analogy around, do you teach someone, what is it? Do you give someone a fish or teach them how to
Right.
fish? Like
Mm-hmm.
improving our thinking skills is like that meta skill. It's like more how to fish. So I think it's just so important all the time and even more so now. So I appreciate you all being here and spending your time with me.
Oh, well, thank you for having us on. I also always love time with you and being in conversation. So we've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. Favorite people, favorite topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Hearts all around. So I'm so glad you all are here. And I shared this. I feel like the world is so like topsy-turvy right now. I know that there's just times when you don't feel yourself, or at least I don't feel myself, I should say, because there's so much change, there's so many changing dynamics, there's so many things going on kind of internal to our businesses and organizations and external from the dynamics, US globally, just etc. So I was just wondering from you all's perspective, like what do you think makes navigating these times, this complexity, the uncertainty, just so challenging for leaders today?
Oh, yeah. Lots is
Yeah.
going on, more and more.
Yeah.
And we think a lot about this. Like, what are the trends? Why is this important now? And to start out, basically, humans aren't wired for uncertainty. We were
Yeah.
evolutionarily initially like, let's predict and know what's coming our way and keep ourselves safe. So, just the idea of not knowing is initially going to give us more of a fight or flight response or reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just going on for us. But right now, in the world today, there is so much uncertainty. So we have to evolve our own thinking to get a little bit better and more comfortable with this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to shift and change over time. But what the landscape looks like is stacking disruptions, technology with AI coming out, with political change, climate change, crises, it seems, at every turn that we're really bringing to our mind often. And the pace of change and the caliber level of change is increasing and speeding up. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot for us to take on and learn to handle so quickly. And then another pressure, especially as we're talking about leaders today, is organizations are very outcome and performance driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this pressure on leaders today, and it's always been there, but it feels like a mismatch now because there's this pressure for predictability. Like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, if you can make this predictable, we can get the outcomes that we
Yeah.
want. But then the actual reality of the world is that it's uncertain.
Mm.
So a company wants predictability for outcome based, but the world is uncertain and we feel this tension, and that's a lot of stress and pressure and demand for certainty when the reality is uncertainty. So it's a lot coming at us. And there is an opportunity, we think, to shift our mindset around this. But even just the framing of why is this so hard? Yes, it
Mm-hmm.
is. And we sometimes like uncertainty when you think about a
Mm.
plot twist in a book,
Oh,
or when
yeah.
you think about a haunted house that we choose to pay for and go to, and these
I
different
don't,
things.
Lisa, but I get it. Other people
No,
do.
that ship sailed for me a while ago where I was like, when did I stop liking these?
Yeah,
But
but I get it. Some people do. I
that idea.
yeah.
And so there is something in us that says we kind of like the not knowing space. And how do we shift how we feel about it as not necessarily disruptive, but an opening for creativity and possibility? So
Mm.
that's kind of a shift, I'll say, but it's a lot there. So, Jay, anything you'd add or surmise to what I shared?
Yeah, I don't like haunted houses either. Um, I know, I think that maybe I would just sort of underscore this idea of when you talked about threat, the what happens is the more uncertainty and the more volatility that is in our environment, the higher our need for reaching conclusions, coming to closure, grabbing onto anything that looks like certainty, even if it's not optimal, even if it's, snake oil. We'd
Mm.
much rather have an answer than to continue to cycle through this kind of feeling of being uncertain when when the stakes are high and we're trying to achieve a particular outcome. So I'd say we've never really been effective under conditions of uncertainty, and
Mm-hmm.
the more you have, the more you have to be on the lookout for settling for um, answers that really aren't going to be helpful to you.
Mm. Yeah. You know what? I could totally see that when you were saying that. I thought about a friend, just a personal friend who was in the midst of like just didn't have a job for a while, and that felt very uncertain because it's like, financial uncertainty, housing uncertainty, like all of these things. And she's someone who is like, it so surprised me, but she ended up in this kind of a scam around a job that she thought was going to land, but it wasn't. And it kind of is a indicative of how I don't uncertain the world is today, that I get so many job scams. Like you're trying to scam me with a job. That's so
Yeah,
interesting to me.
Yeah.
But she ended up kind of involved in it. And after I talked to her, I said, I said, I'm so surprised. She said, I am too. And I asked her, I said, what was it? And she said it was this, I don't know if she used the word uncertainty, but she was like, I just felt so uncomfortable
right.
not knowing, like all these unknowns, that this felt like an answer. This felt like certainty to your point. And so I went after it when I never would have done that before. So
Mm,
I can see like this mismatch, Lisa, you mentioned around kind of the world's uncertain, but we really want this predictability. And that tension
mm,
could lead you toward less, not the right decision, not the optimal decisions, and not even
Right.
thinking your best because you
Y-
so want to resolve this uncertainty that now you're doing things you really, if it wasn't like that, you might not be choosing to do. That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
yeah.
You're susceptible to scams
Yeah.
more so,
Hmm.
and you're susceptible to authority more so.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. That's so interesting. So let me ask you all this. I know you all talked about, and you mentioned, Lisa, this idea of cognitive slack. And when you said it, I was thinking, God, I want some of that. Like, I want some of this cognitive slack. That sounds so lovely. Like, just not, which I'm guessing you mean is like not having something specific to think about. Is that fair? Or what I want to make sure I understood what you meant
mm.
first when you said it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a client we've worked with that talks about financial slack, and
Mm,
that might be more of an idea that's easier to grasp. Like, oh, do you have some slack in your finances in
hmm
order to loosen the grip and kind of just have some space and
Yeah.
room when something is needed or comes
Mm,
up? And we thought it really triggered for us, ooh, this idea of cognitive slack, like in our brain, space to be thoughtful and think and like allow us that room to pause and respond in a thoughtful way. But if you are constantly moving from one thing to the next, or your brain is filled with, I have, like right now, my mother-in-law is going through some health issues. And sometimes I'll find like my brain is just ruminating around what's going on for her and what's next and when are we at the hospital, and
mm,
the cognitive slack I had or right now or have right now is less because that's taking up some space. So
mm.
does that help explain
hmm
how we think about that?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It sounded attractive and it sounds even more attractive now. Like the idea of space to think is just, I feel like it's definitely at a premium at this moment. And I know you all talk about attention agility and just, I guess maybe just start with like what that means and why is it a critical skill in kind of the way things are today in the midst of changes.
Yeah, well, it's sort of connected to this cognitive slack. What's interesting is I think when people are, sort of unexpectedly in a moment where they have the opportunity to pause and, their attention isn't being yanked and they're not accustomed to that, cognitive slack might not initially feel like a gift, but
Mm,
but
yeah.
but it really is, and what it requires is a kind of a skill around because it's sort of what when you did the introduction, Arlene, and you talked about this kind of meta skill. Attention agility is kind of this meta noticing how you notice.
Mm,
And it's the ability to intentionally and strategically shift your focus based on what's happening as opposed to having your attention managed
mm,
by your circumstances or some algorithm.
mm,
If you've found yourself scrolling through posts and videos on some social media platform you know what the opposite of attention agility feels like. You look up and a half an hour has gone by
Uh-huh.
because your attention has been hijacked. Probably people can also identify with the experience of, maybe you're listening to a presentation or a sales pitch, and suddenly you get this insight that, I think I understand how this person has designed this presentation in order to influence me. And that's your attention agility kicking in. You're suddenly aware of how you're thinking and how the
Mm.
information that's coming in is influencing you and how you're reacting. And if
Mhm.
you can, develop that attention agility over time, you begin to recognize patterns, you build self-awareness. Your self-awareness is kind of on demand and online in the background all the time.
Mm.
Um, I know a lot of your audience probably they're coaches, facilitators, people that are doing those roles are usually pretty good at attention agility. If you can imagine like a facilitator in a room, there's a lot going on, and
Yeah.
the facilitator needs to both simultaneously be aware of what conversation is happening,
Mhm.
how are the people in the room feeling and thinking about the conversation, how am I reacting to what's happening in the room? And how is what I'm reacting influencing how I'm choosing to make facilitation moves? All of that kind of background thinking is
Mhm.
happening while you're trying to make progress and get a grasp on what's going on and how and what to do next. And so we think of that as the skill that's required for leaders to be more effective in these uncertain times, particularly because um, your habits of thought, when things are kind of more predictable, may not be serving you when things are volatile and complex. And you need the attention agility to recognize when you might be bringing out an old playbook or a tried and true strategy, and you're looking for leading indicators that that might not be the right approach. But if you're not attentive to it, you're probably just going to double down on what you're used to doing, what you're comfortable doing, and then suddenly it turns out it's not giving you the predictable results, but you don't know why.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah, so it's what you're describing, if I'm understanding it correctly, and you correct me for sure if I'm not. I'm thinking it's not just it's not just part of it is managing your attention, like what you focus on.
Yeah,
But while you're doing that, you're also aware of how you're thinking about this particular situation or problem. Like
yeah,
it's kind of it's not just managing your attention. That could be like, oh, I'm going to focus on this problem. But while I'm focusing on this problem, I'm thinking about like, how am I approaching this problem? Or what are my
that's right.
thinking patterns that I'm using to go solve this problem?
Yeah, it's exactly right. I'll give you
Okay.
maybe a more practical example
Yeah.
that I know I can identify with. Um, let's say you're working on a problem or somebody's come to you with a problem and you've got a history with the individual.
Hmm.
And so they're describing the situation, and you already have a preconceived point of view about this individual. You think, this person always exaggerates, they're always dramatizing situations.
Hmm.
If you've got attention agility, you're aware of that thought,
Mm.
and you're not letting that thought influence how you're taking in the information because you're risking missing something important
Yeah.
because you're making a judgment about the situation based on your bias about the person bringing the situation to you.
Hmm.
If you're unconscious in that moment, you might ignore or, you know, you might not consider it as important as it might be, or you might be missing something really important about how it's affecting the person, or so it's all just sort of noticing that. It's not, and by the way, it doesn't mean that you're wrong. Like your initial judgments might be completely accurate.
Yeah.
And at the same
They might
time,
be dramatic.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
but without the attention agility, you're
Yeah.
not giving yourself the option of wondering whether this is a moment when you should discount the person or
Hmm.
discount what they're saying because
Hmm.
you're making judgments about the person.
Yeah, I could totally see how that would be helpful and how that would make you just a better decision maker, a better responder to other people. So, like, how do you develop this? Like, how do you develop this skill of, feels like almost a hyper presence? Like, I'm present in this moment to the person and I'm present to myself. Like, I have this really, you have to be pretty attentive, I imagine, in these moments to do this. I don't know. Like, how do you develop this as a skill set or as a muscle?
Yeah. Well, I think in coaching, I work this a lot for myself because you are
Mm.
how
Yep.
who you are is how you coach. So I have to pay attention to my own patterns, tendencies, what's going on for me. But
Great.
then in the work with leaders, when they pinpoint a pattern they want to change, the place that I often start with them is a noticing practice. And that's kind of the starting point of like, what is the trigger here? And an example that I'll give, a personal example for me, is silence. I realized that silence is actually a gift and an opportunity for people to think, share, have an opening. But I grew up in a household where there's no silence.
Mm.
Like, if there is silence, someone is sharing a thought, putting on a TV,
Mm.
singing a song. Like, I just came from a very vocal, there's always something going on
Mm.
space. And when I went through my coaching certification, and really just in the past probably 4 or 5 years, I had this realization or a noticing that, oh, I fill space pretty quickly when there's silence, and
Mm.
I want to change that pattern. And so the first step was like, what goes on for me when there's silence?
Yeah.
And this is the noticing practice that starts that attention agility muscle
Mm.
of, I'm in a moment of silence and I notice that I'm here.
Yeah.
But what then I ask myself, what goes on for me? Or ask a client, what goes on for me when it's silent? And
Mm.
that's where my mind is building that attention agility muscle. Is I've noticed it and I'm feeling awkward. It's uncomfortable. I want to say something. And I just pause in there and say, just wait longer,
Hmm. Yeah.
and get comfortable with the discomfort. And then I was amazed at what would open up by me not filling space. And
Hmm.
so it's the way that I help clients and myself build the muscle is this idea of a noticing practice and saying, when it's silent, my knee jerk reaction and my instinct is to fill it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But the noticing practice and the attention agility muscle is to sit with it and say, what's going on for me in this moment, which is that paying attention to your attention and what's going on. And then you can slowly change that behavior over time and say, just wait longer. It's not
Mm.
actually that uncomfortable. I assumed it would be, but some cool things are emerging. So that's one way.
Mm, yeah. And when we're describing that, so I totally relate to that too. I mean, in the coaching profession around the need to get super comfortable with silence so people can think and process for themselves. I've had to work on that as well. And can you share one more example of it, just so people, because I'm thinking one in my mind for myself, but I'm just curious. Could you share another example of how a leader might, something they might notice about the way they're thinking or behaving? Like, what's something
Hmm.
else you might notice, you think, from a noticing practice?
Yeah. I had a coaching session today,
Mm.
and this has happened as with a few of my clients, but it's this, I'm getting triggered and I'm about to respond in a way that's not helpful.
Mm.
Like, so everybody has their own version of, I roll my eyes. My face says everything.
Yeah.
I'm going to say something because I want to offload this emotion that I'm
Mhm.
feeling, so I go to a reactionary place.
Mhm.
And so the work of the noticing practice is what's the first thing that happens? And one of my clients today said, I chuckle. Like I chuckle because I know what's about to happen and I'm loading up.
Yeah.
And this chuck, and I was like, that's amazing. You
Yeah.
notice that before you're about to do the reactionary thing, this chuckle thing happens for you. And it's kind of inside. It's not like people hear her,
Right.
but I was like, that's the thing. So we don't have to work on what's next quite yet. The first thing is notice that
Mhm.
chuckle and just pause
Mhm.
and kind of say, there it is, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to do anything yet, but you're
Mhm.
noticing it, and then you're saying the pattern is this, and I'm just going to start noticing when I do that chuckle thing and
Mhm.
what's going on for me in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, we probably all have. I'm thinking of a few that are patterns that you just can easily fall into like over and over again until you realize, okay, what's getting me into this pattern? Okay, I love that. Okay, thank you for sharing that example.
Mhm.
I think that'll be helpful. I know you'll have this tool around Scan that helps people notice and pay attention to the right things and navigate uncertainty. Maybe talk a little bit about your model that you have around this.
Where we're going to put into the show notes of the podcast an invitation for people to experience the scan framework because I think it's a lot easier to grasp the idea and the power of it if you take time to do the assessment. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete this assessment, and it'll give you some information about how you move from thinking to action. So that's the headline.
Okay,
It's
good.
it's not a personality assessment. It's very focused on how do people move from situations in which they're trying to figure out what to do, but they find that there's overwhelming amount of information or there's a lot of uncertainty or complexity. So what information do they gravitate towards to help them feel in control, comfortable? What
Mhm.
information do they tend to trust more than other information? So SCAN stands for structures, context, assumptions, and needs.
Mhm.
So these are four kind of dimensions or lenses through which to view a situation. And what's important about these four lenses is that each of them is both important and available in all situations,
Mhm.
but hidden. And so the reason that we think it's a useful tool is because it's often the hidden influences that keep us stuck. So I'll just do a quick kind of example of the different dimensions to give you a feel for it. And then I don't know, we can keep, I'm a, the fear is I will continue to talk about it beyond what anybody's interested in. So I'll let you,
I'm
I
interested,
mean,
so
I'll
yes.
let you figure out what's useful to ask me. But
Yeah.
structures are the kind of the habits, the routines, um, the processes that we have in our organizations and in our lives. So a classic example of a structure getting in the way is when an organization maybe changes its strategy and they want to prioritize a different kind of sales strategy for their business, but they don't change their compensation structure, and they discover that the incentives for salespeople are not aligned with kind of what they want people selling now or how they want people interacting with customers. So that's a classic example of a structure that is holding things in place
Mhm.
and creating a stuckness. Context is all about what's happening in the environment. So, technology, regulation, social trends, competition, the environment. So, things that happen and that disrupt an organization, like maybe a new technology like AI or a new competitive threat that comes out of nowhere. If you're not sort of lifting up your head periodically to look at your environment, there could be contextual influences that are potentially opportunities you're not seeing or threats that you're not paying attention to.
Mhm.
Assumptions, the A, that's all about our underlying worldviews and beliefs. Human beings have beliefs and worldviews that dictate their kind of values and priorities. Um, and organizations have assumptions and beliefs too. We we often see organizations that have a point of view about this is the business we're in, or this is why customers choose us, or this is why employees choose us. And those assumptions kind of go underground and dictate a lot of resources and priority allocations. And
Mhm.
yet the world may change, but we don't challenge the assumption. Um, if you think you're in the if like Kodak, if you think you're in the film business and then
Mhm.
it turns out that people don't want film,
Mhm.
you're not ready for the world that comes at you. Uh, Needs, of course, is all about what's underlying, the what matters to the people that matter to us, what's driving their desires, their needs, their fears. Um, who are we leaving out of our from our, collecting of perspectives that might have a point of view? Or a classic example is um, in what way are our customers' needs changing, or maybe the customer's customers' needs changing, and yet we're still presuming that we're bringing the same value to the customers that we did when the customer's needs were different, but we haven't bothered to look at it again. So again,
Mhm.
all four of these things are invisible, but important, particularly if we're moving from thinking to action and we're not getting the outcomes we want. The assessment is designed to tell you of those four dimensions, is there one that you're drawn to immediately and maybe one that you don't give enough attention to? And that might, and then the platform that supports the assessment is got, they're full of videos and tools and ideas, particularly if there's a there's a dimension that you don't typically go to when trying
Mhm.
to figure things out.
Mhm.
And we're now collecting a lot of data, so we're getting some organizational data about um, kind of company cultures. And
Mhm.
it's very interesting to see that you can look at leaders and organizations and compare and contrast how organizationally they tend to favor certain kinds of information over other kinds of information and what the implications of that might be.
Mhm. Yeah. I can see that. Like I was thinking about when you said a couple of organizations I've worked with, and yeah, some are much more externally oriented in terms of the context and the environment. Some are not at all externally oriented to context. They're much more kind of their own beliefs and assumptions, like rooted in that more of a traditional, who we are kind of a position.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I can see how over relying on anyone without considering the others. I guess you could miss things
exactly.
is the
Yeah.
idea. Okay, can you share an example of like how someone maybe if has used this to solve a problem, or what's an example on how someone might apply it, do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a specific example from a client that we had, and then I can give you a more generic kind of use case.
Hmm.
So we we introduce the scan framework in a variety of ways, depending on what the client needs. We have a program that we call Embracing Uncertainty, which teaches this sort of attention agility. And once
Hmm.
you develop attention agility, how do you use the scan framework when you're taking that pause? And Lisa uses this a lot too, so she may have an example as well or a use case in mind. But I would say the one thing that we found helpful is in discovery conversations. So salespeople in particular are often having the initial conversation with a client and trying to discover sort of what's the situation
Hmm.
that may or may not call for a way that I can support or provide services or products. And if salespeople can sort of step back and try to get a lay of the land through these four dimensions instead of simply focusing in on listening for what's going to be a sale,
Mm,
They're not only helping themselves figure out a better way to be supportive of the customer, they're also helping the customer think.
yeah.
And so we find that to be a really useful use case. I don't know, Lisa, if you've got another example or way you've used it.
I think that that big picture shares a lot. One thing that was coming up for me is the that the structures and assumptions hold things in place, and that the context and needs are what are changing and what kind of
Mm,
open up possibilities and stimulate change. So oftentimes, like I come from the world of sales and business development, and I'll be talking to somebody in a coaching conversation or thinking with them, and they're realizing that some of the incentive structures that they've put into place are outdated and are kind of driving a behavior that they were unintended or that used to be a great one, but they've got to update that. So there's just different ways to see blind spots through these hidden influences that are pertinent, and sometimes you just need one dimension that you're kind of not paying attention to, and other times it helps to take the full swath and really open up the thinking before you move into solution space.
mm,
And it's a great tool for getting up on the balcony and thinking with somebody or with a team before you move into the place of what are our ideas and solutions. Let's
mhm.
first start with this discovery of what's really going on here in a fuller way.
Yeah, and a more hopefully building out, I guess, a more complete picture of you kind of said the structure and assumptions. Is that what you said? Kind of hold things in place. It's like the planted pivot, planted foot, I guess, in like basketball, and then the other foot's like the pivot,
Oh,
Yeah.
I
the
like
needs
that.
and content. Like, is that what you were saying? One holds things in place, and the other is what allows you to kind of navigate around or think differently, or is
Yeah.
that
So
fair or
yeah,
no?
no, I love that. Let's feel that. Um, structures. So structures, and by the way, the scan framework is intended to be most useful when you're feeling stuck or you're not getting the outcomes you want,
Hmm.
because it's a lot of thinking that may not be necessary. If
Hmm.
if you have a good grasp of the situation because of your expertise or experience, you
Yeah.
have a pretty good idea of what needs to be done, and you find that if you apply that strategy, it it makes progress, great. That's
Go
great. You
for
don't need
it.
to, yeah.
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 Um,
Don't work it till so hard.
yeah,
Hmm.
but there there's sort of two kinds of stuck that this is particularly good for. If you find that the problem you think you're solving keeps coming back,
Hmm.
structures and assumptions are probably the place to focus on, because your structures and your assumptions are holding things
Hmm.
in place.
Okay.
Structures are very difficult to change,
Hmm.
even if you recognize that they may be the reason that things aren't going the way they need to be going. It's very hard to change those. And assumptions are hard to change because we don't know what assumptions
Yes.
we have until
Yeah.
somebody does a deep dive with us, right? So
Hmm.
structures and assumptions hold things in place. The other kind of stuck is I'm overwhelmed. I'm in unexplored territory. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I should do next. It's not like the problem is repeating itself.
Yeah.
I don't know how to take the next step. Context and needs are
Hmm.
sources of, new ways of moving forward because
Hmm.
they're outside of our control, and yet they are the sources of potential inspiration or threats or opportunities.
Yeah.
So you may see something in the context that provides you with an idea, or you might understand that there's an unmet need that someone has that provides an opportunity. So if you're
Hmm.
stuck trying to figure out what to do, context and needs. If you're stuck trying to understand why the problem's back again,
Yeah.
structures and assumptions.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess you could use this like a personal issue or personal problem that you keep kind of bumping up against, or an organizational topic. I guess it could work either way. And do you see people using it both ways? Like, how do you see people leverage it the most?
Yeah, I don't know, Lisa, you've been using it in a
I'm sorry.
coaching context one-on-one more than I have.
I've used it in individual examples to help somebody with more of an organizational based change
Mm,
or with this desire to be a more strategic thought partner. So
yeah.
I would say we've used it more and seen it come up more when there's complexity, lots of variables going on, and more of an organizational change that involves others.
Hmm.
Um, I've maybe used elements of the scam framework, but without it being a full, here's what I'm using and scan
Yeah.
in more personal situations. But I find that I use it the most in more complex with lots of variables and organizational
Mm,
moves and changes.
yeah. Okay. So, what do you see as leaders? You all work with a lot of different leaders and a lot of different organizations. What do you see as some of the major either blind spots or, kind of mistakes we're using in our thinking? Like, what do we think leaders are missing out on or common mistakes we're making in how we're thinking about things?
I think I can turn the question into something that connects there around a blind spot of there's a lot of expectation for leaders to know answers
Mm,
and to be knowers and to say, let me solve this problem and come to me and I'll get involved and we'll solve this. It's like we've come from this place of let's make things better and know answers and be experts and go get our, academic prowess with our PhDs. And so a lot of times the knee jerk of being a good leader is to have an answer, a solution, a way forward, a way to make somebody's life easier and solve a problem.
mhm,
And I find that isn't always the best habit. It creates this blind spot because if we could just say, I don't know,
mm,
let me hear what's going on for you and your thoughts and come from a place of connection, curiosity, figuring it out together and holding off on needing to be the knower with the answer to who's right, who
yeah.
gets the check mark and says it was great job,
Yeah.
right? Then we might open up the opportunity for us to think better together, as well as the connection can happen. Once you have the answer, the fun is over, right?
Yeah.
Like in a way. Now
Yeah.
we're moving to execution and we all know what happens there. And it's fine. We need that too. But if we can just pause and open up the curiosity and the chance for something new to emerge by not having an answer yet, I
Mm,
think that would make a huge impact.
hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When you were saying that, I was thinking about how yeah, so many leaders today were at least partially in that kind of, I was thinking about the Jack Welch era of
Yeah.
leadership, and it was like,
Mhm.
there was that big article, it was like the best manager or whatever it was, but it was very much a front foot directive. I know what we need to do. It just was a certain style that I think still permeates what a lot of us think about is a
Yeah.
good leader. You're right. We think of it's like, oh, I'm here to help and direct, and it's very much a give energy, as opposed to this kind of partnership energy. And like James, you're talking, the connection energy is something I think a lot of leaders today, like we're developing it, but it's still new. It's not like your first inkling of what you think about you're supposed to be doing as a leader. So I think that's
Yeah.
really, yeah,
Mhm.
that's really interesting. Welcome to Anelra. Have you ever thought about unlocking the full potential of yourself or the leaders in your organization? Imagine the impact of executive coaching. Ready to transform your leadership impact? Visit us at www.anelratalent.com. Anelra, coaching solutions that work. What would be like, I guess before I get to my very last question, like what any last takeaway or something that's still on your mind or something you'd want the audience to take away from the conversation?
I hope that people will really take the time to do the scan profile. I think they'll find it valuable and interesting. And if somebody wants to reach out to us to understand a little bit more about what their profile means and how they can best use the tool, we're always happy to chat with folks about that. So I would just maybe remind people that that's available to them, and it's going to be available through the end of the year.
Okay,
Hmm.
awesome.
And I guess one thing I'd say is, in summary, or a key takeaway, is to work on creating space instead of filling it.
Mm.
It's something I've been moving towards and working on, but just that idea of the edit and creating space versus rushing to fill it.
Hmm.
We could have like a TikTok hashtag creating
Yeah.
space, and when you flip the onto the video,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
it's nothing.
We'd probably go viral, Jay, actually. That's actually
Right?
pretty
It's
creative,
some
honestly.
soothing background music.
You know how what a joy that would be if I was flipping through my TikTok, which is
Yeah.
like totally addictive and like you get a space of just like nothingness. Like this is
Yeah.
your create space. This is your free space. Like
Yeah.
it's like, oh yes, I need that. That actually is a really good idea. You might
Oh,
want to run with
yeah.
that. Yeah. You might want to run with that. So thank you all so much for joining. We'll definitely put in the show notes the access to the scan tool. So thank you all for offering that. I think that's a great resource. For us to kind of better understand our thinking habits and just to get better. And we'll put your business information in there as well around Unstuck Minds. Thank you for sharing the vision from that. I think that's really inspiring. So I appreciate you all sharing that as well. Before we close, I like to ask the final question, which is what do you personally do to work well and live well? Meaning, just what's something you do pretty consistently to create a meaningful life for yourself?
Mm.
Um, okay, well, I'll start. I'm going to say two. One that I do have been doing for a few years now, and one I've recently adopted. So the one I've been doing is I have developed a daily meditation practice. That's how I start my day. 20 minutes of meditation. You know, speaking of doing nothing, somehow or another, I'm finding that very addicting. And something I've just adopted, and I feel like this is a sort of a small act of resistance against just waking up every day and seeing news footage and media coverage of, you know, uh, people saying terrible things about other people, or a world that feels sort of upside down to me. And a lot of the rhetoric that I hear, it just kind of hurts me. So my new practice is to um, find small acts of kindness and
Mm,
tell somebody about them. Like it's also a good attention, agility, and noticing practice because it forces you to, you know, scan the world for somebody doing something kind. Nothing big, nothing heroic, you know,
mm,
somebody lets you in on the freeway, or,
Mm.
you know, somebody smiles at you when you pass them by. But whatever it is, I'm trying to give more attention to that and then be sure to share that with others to renew my faith in humanity.
mm. That's beautiful. That's
Love
beautiful.
that. Love that, Jay. For me, a meaningful life comes down to relationships and really like soul giving, meaningful connection.
Mm.
And so I really try to build in time for that each and every day. So that would be probably my biggest practice, is that soul giving connection of some sort, like this conversation, or one of those a day at least. I usually have more, and I'm grateful for that. And then another, more for me personally, is bookending my day with quiet time and no device. And I am pretty good about getting up in the morning, first one, and getting some time to myself to move and reflect before my kids and the world opens up and begins. And then what's more recent is just putting the phone away an hour before I'm going to go to bed and not even looking at it. My kids are in the house. We're all good. I might check for an emergency text, but beyond that, that hour before bed, and I have been sleeping so much better.
Hmm.
I think it makes a big difference.
Need to add that into the rotation.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah.
to improve my sleep right now, I need. So, okay, I like
Ah,
that.
that's one of them. That's what I'm working on.
I love it. Well, thank you both for sharing what helps you create a meaningful life. I think it's inspiring to hear. It just helps all of us have new ideas around what can I do to make my life more meaningful as well. So I appreciate you all sharing that and just being on the podcast and just being who you are and how you work with clients and support them and support leaders in their thinking and in their connection. I just really appreciate the work you all do. And I definitely appreciate you joining. So thank you
Mm.
so much for being here.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Arlene.
us,
This was
Arlene. Yeah.
great.
Yeah, good. So thank you all for joining as well and listening into the conversation and be well. Thanks for listening to the Work Well, Live Well podcast. If you're ready to grow as a leader or as an organization, head to enelratalent.com. That's ENELRA talent.com to learn how we can support you. Like what you heard? Follow or review the show so you don't miss what's next.